Okay, here's the second game in my Art of Siege wandering. I just love putting the box up there. I love these soap boxes. And I don't have very many of them. I think only two. This one and TSS. Down there. And poor TSS is in worse shape. This was in pristine shape when I got it. It was amazing. I gotta put this somewhere. But let's start with a few thoughts before I go into it. Now, obviously, we played Tyre recently. This game actually shares a lot of the rules with Tyre. But there are some significant differences. But in terms of the land movement and combat, it's actually very similar. I'll still go through the rules largely in it. Now, this one's not going to have a naval aspect. The Crusaders essentially have a complete blockade, and they're not going to attempt a naval assault on the walls of the city. So all we're going to handle is the land side. What's special about this particular battle and why they picked this one, well, if you watched my Crusade series, it actually started set up with this battle not quite as far along as the siege, not quite as far along as we've gotten here. This is after a winter. Richard's arrived, but what's interesting, you see this outer work here, Saladin is outside harassing the Crusader army. So you've got a Muslim garrison, which he's actually managed to push additional troops into by breaking through with a battle earlier. But there's then this second earthenwork, more a ditch than anything else, with the Crusader camp inside of it. Now, you can imagine the size of this thing by thinking about the fact these are big old trebuchets here, and they're barely in range of the city walls. And then try to look at the scale of what else is there. So you've got a huge encampment surrounding the city here. And then outside of this, we've got Saladin with his camps. And his armies are here, divided into three armies. The army of Sinjan, which is his own army of Mosul, and army of Egypt. These are just distinguished because Saladin's going to have opportunities to commit these. We have a series of 16 turns, and like in Tyre, they're going to be divided into kind of a planning stage where some administrative tasks take place, but also tunneling, as you see here, and strategic movement. Then an option based on what the Crusader wants to do on whether it's going to be a bombardment or an assault. Now, the Crusader's not the only person who gets to choose in this case. Saladin has some option here, and if we go into an assault, we go into this more detailed thing. Now, unlike Tyre, you can assault multiple times in this game. Very, very likely that's going to happen. The troops we have are similar to the kind of troops we had in Tyre, and they have the similar kind of ratings. If we look at units, we've got the attack factor and the movement allowance on regular units. Missile units have a defense-only value, well, combat value, and for the attack-capable units. But we also have some serious siege engines here, some towers. We have ballistae and some smaller catapults here. And then we have the giant catapults, which are really trebuchets probably. Maybe not all, though. But huge siege engines that are a major, major investment. You also see we have camps. The leaders are the same as the land leaders in Tyre. 4 annoying numbers, which we'll start to get used to here. One number, I think the first one is the combat strength that they add to any combat they add. The second, that's a kind of boring one. The second is the morale strength. The third is the radius for the leaders of value. Let's take a look at King Richard. Yeah, he's here. And then the final one's a movement allowance, which is going to be 7 in all cases. Probably could have left the movement allowance off of them and just said they have 7 movement allowance. In addition, we have cav in this game, and not just for the Crusader. The Muslim garrison has a mixture of archers and foot soldiers, they have the walls, which are going to be battered down in the similar manner. Again, I'll go over the rules, but and towards the end of this video, I'll be hitting some special things that are different in here, although those will be interspaced somewhat in the rules as well, probably. Let's see what else we got. We've got the Muslim armies, which some of them are all cav forces. Then we've got Saladin's Guard, which is kind of armored cav, but he's also got things like Archers of the Eye and Naphtha missile men. Some of the other armies are going to have these light cav that are just missile armed cav. They're not very good at melee. Well, they can't melee. In fact, they have this guaranteed requirement to retreat before battle. Now, if you remember, Tyre had this sort of, some units can retreat before battle. Well, that doesn't belong in Tyre. That's part of the rules to this game. They didn't really, what they did was some cut and paste from the rules, which all makes sense in the sense that they are very similar systems. But instead of putting out sort of a system rule book that most of the quads had, and they'd have had to put out 2 of them because, well, actually they'd have to put out 3 because Sevastopol and Lille are significantly different if I recall correctly. But I thought this was more different than it is. Anyway, what do we got? Well, let's start looking at our sequence of play. The first thing that happens is the Crusader is going to, oh, we also have this sheet, which we need in this game. We had one in Tyre, we didn't really need it there, but this one's going to have hidden tunneling going on. Yeah, it's going to be kind of a bitch to solo, but I've done it before. Some games have hidden type actions going on, and I don't really like to play them. Like, say, I don't know, I avoided doing, say, Midway because of the hidden information in it. Or I avoided doing Undead, which I probably should have done. or Warp War recently. And the reason for, that I avoid in those is it's so much of the game. But in this game, it's really one little piece. And I'm going to kind of use some die rolls and fake the decision making here. And you'll see that it's not that important a factor in the whole game. Just like whether you do the bombardment or assault, it's an important decision, as is what Saladin's going to do. And he uses these option chits. He's got a limited number of options. Okay. So in the allocation phase, the Crusader first decides if he's going to bombard or assault secretly. And the Muslim picks one of these chits, which is his intervention counter, for which army is prepared to deal with the Crusaders. The final one, the Saladin attacks, isn't just the Sinjan army, it's everything. And it forces a battle. He's only got a limited of 2 of those to do in the game. The others are less, they're not going to force an assault. But if the Crusaders do an assault, actually everything does come in. So it's kind of just at a delay. Okay, and then the final thing is the Muslim player gets a bunch of engineering points, which he can use for repairing walls and looking for tunnels. Now we've got our little wall damage markers, and we could actually steal some from Tyre if we needed to. And we also have disrupted counters for certain units. I'm trying to remember which units. The garrison, they don't work as normal units do. And we have these filled fosse. The fosse is essentially a moat around there, but there's no water in it. And the Crusaders had to throw garbage into it in order to, at the very least, get their towers going over it. But it also provides them with a defensive penalty if they're stuck in it. And this works very much like the fosse. We'll see that in a moment. And we got these tunnel base markers, which are where the Crusaders start their tunnel. The Muslims are aware where the tunnel starts. We've got a lot of charts that are, well, kind of familiar, actually. Got a bombardment table for the giant catapults. Counter bombardment for minor catapults shooting the giant ones. Wall repair table. When you spend engineering points, you get to roll on here to see how much you actually repair. The die roll goes here, and the amount of points repaired is here and here. We got a fire combat results table, which I think is the same one from Tire, and an attenuation table, which tells you which column of this you use based on the type of unit and the distance. You'll notice some of them, like catapults, work only at longer range, or like ballistae work better at a longer range. Just some oddnesses there, but same basic system that you'll see in a lot in other games too. That it's just odd that they called it attenuation or whatever. I don't know. The melee chart, I think, yeah, this is significantly different from the Tire one. It goes out to higher odds, I believe, and we could check that. And the subterranean combat, when the mines are discovered, there'll be a fight. Now for the terrain effects chart, let's take a look at what we've got here, because this is kind of important to the game. Okay, so the marsh and this river ravine down here are bad places to get yourself caught. The camp, so the Muslims are going to be reduced in strength at the camp because they're busy looting and they're not comfortable there. An unfilled fosse or the outer work are a penalty to the defender, as well as being movement. Again, you can't just walk into a wall hex or attack one, but there's a little difference to this. You are allowed to attack, and the rules aren't very good from what I can tell about it. But essentially you can do a ladder assault, and then I think there's a chance that you just get to attack it. The defender is going to be doubled whenever he's in a wall, but he's doubled in a breach as well, so it's not necessarily that good. The big difference is you've got these annoying lost my train of thought there. You've got these annoying chances of falling off your ladder when you climb up it. Now, that doesn't hurt you, padded armor or something. It doesn't hurt the unit that's trying to do it, but it makes the attack fail automatically. They can't make that assault, so it may disrupt them as well, which would be kind of hurt. The Muslims were allowed to set up anywhere in Acre or in this hex. Now, I can't think of any reason from the rules of the game why you'd set up in that hex. All right. Let's keep going through the sequence of play here. Then there's a strategic movement where you're allowed to shift your troops around at a high movement rate. I've got a limitation where I can't be within 4 hexes of the fosse with any of my stuff. Let's see what else we got here. Okay. Then the Crusader gets to spend his tunneling points on building the tunnel bases and then beginning to attempt to dig here. And when you dig, you're going to make a roll, and on a 6, you've hit some rock or something, you can't keep going with your tunnel. And that ends up being an issue of some difficulty. I don't know, do I have a tunneling table here? Nah, I guess it's just in the tunnel rolls. So if you plotted several hexes of tunneling off one of your bases, then you could get stopped in, say, the first hex of tunneling, and then you'd lose the points that go further than that. And you'd have to go around that blocked space. The tunnels can't really, they can't cross, they can't combine. And their goal is obviously to dig under a wall. Once you get under a wall, you can declare you've destroyed it. Now, the Muslim is not completely defenseless at this. He can spend engineering points searching for your tunnels as they get close. And that's in the Muslim tunnel discovery segment. He has to use his engineering points for this, and he calls out a hex. And if he discovers a tunnel hex, then we go to the tunnel combat table and see what happens. Okay, and at this point, you cave in the, if your tunnel is under a wall, you can cave it in, and that ends up destroying that wall permanently. So not only is it a 6-point breach, but it's irreparable. Normally, the damage from the catapults will be much, much less. All right, then we go to a bombardment and repair, and this is going to work kind of similarly to Tyre, except that my bombards are out here fixed on land. They only get to fire once, and then the counter bombardment, the Acre, the garrison gets to fire its, and I got another one down here that I ought to put on top. Gets to fire its catapult at the bombards. Now those catapults will also be useful in the same way as the small catapults that the Crusaders have when we come to an assault, but at this point they can't do that. In fact, their range on an assault, if you look at the attenuation table, is only 4 hexes, whereas their range in counter battery fire is the full 6 hexes. They can destroy, well, damage these big catapults. If they do so, those catapults come back in 2 turns. Likewise, these things can be damaged. They come back in 3 turns, but I don't think they can be fired at by the catapults at this point. I don't remember exactly how they're damaged. All right. Then, if the Muslim has points allocated to wall repair, he gets to repair some of those damaged walls. He allocates them before he rolls his die, and he's got this wall repair table that we talked about. All right. Then we go to the assault and regrouping. The Crusader moves his units, then the Muslim moves his units. Both sides do the simultaneous fire combat. This is the same annoying situation as in Tyre. So movement, there's no stacking, more or less. You can put a siege engine, a siege equipment of some sort, 1 unit and 1 leader in a hex. So where was I? Yeah. So this mutual fire combat, basically it's all simultaneous fire. You declare it. Now you can do it locally, but it's going to be harder in this game than in Tyre. In Tyre you have, well, at least when I played the Macedonians with my multiple little sectors, you had many places where combat would not interfere with each other. Here it gets a little more difficult because if you're assaulting the walls, you may find that you've got missiles just interspersed with all the troops, and you'll have that over here with the Crusaders too. I just find that more useful. It allows you to shoot units off the wall or whatever, or out of the attack beforehand. And if you disrupt them, they don't lose their zone of control if they're disrupted, but they can't attack. And I think they lose their zone in Tyre. They certainly played it that way. And let me see what else. Oh, if they take 2 disruption results, say if 2 units are firing on them, or if they get meleeed and get fired on, then they have to retreat. And retreat's another option that comes off of the fire results or the melee table. And what it does is it forces you to run back your movement allowance plus some, essentially. Although it's not as, if you're on a wall, you don't have to retreat as far. And that also is worded differently from Tyre, which may be an error in one of the 2 games. Or they could have just diverged. Okay, after that, we come to the Crusaders get to fill the fosse. And they use combat units which have not been moved but are adjacent to the fosse to put the little fill markers in. Those fill markers get rid of the penalty of the unfilled fosse. They allow these suckers to actually move into them. And these guys have a crew to move with them, but you want to have a unit in them because they allow you to attack the wall without penalty, without the doubling, and they allow you to, I think they provide some defensive bonus to fire. The Accursed Tower and the Prison Tower are special. That's this one and this one. They have additional defenses. And the castle tower has a -3. That's here. That's even better. No, I don't. German knights are easier to shoot. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to remember all the mods. And it's hard to see because they're on the map as opposed to on a sheet or on the back of the rules. But we'll try to do the best we can. Okay. So, where are we? Right. So then when we get to the melee segment, there are 3 segments of melee. First, the garrison gets to do its melee. So it gets to try to push the Crusaders back. After it goes, the Crusaders get to do their melee. And we won't talk too much about it. We get these odds charts. Melee is entirely optional. As with Tyre, you get to add the strength, the combat value of a leader, if he's with his contingent, and if only his contingent is what's attacking in a particular melee, he gets to use a modifier to the die roll equal to his morale rating. Now the armies in this also have morale, and we'll go over maybe changes to that morale as we page through the rolls to look for things to talk about. So anyway, the Muslim garrison attacks first, then the Crusaders attack, and then the Muslim outside army gets to attack. Then both sides lose their disruption. And finally, after you do, 10 impulses of combat through those phases, you go to a regrouping. Any units which are unable to trace back to their kind of command center. So for the Muslim army, they have to trace off board. For the garrison, it has to trace into Acre or to this space. And for the Crusaders, they have to just trace back to one of their camp spaces. If you can't manage that, your unit's eliminated. Now, eliminated units, there should be a box for them, but there's not. I'll probably keep them up here or something. The reason is they're not fully eliminated. They end up pairing up at the end of any assault phase with any other damaged units or any other destroyed units. One goes in the bag and one comes back into play to be recharged, regenerated. Just to indicate that a lot of the losses were kind of stragglers in that kind of situation. So you don't want to fully penalize either army. The armies would decrease maybe too rapidly if you did that. And then we move the game turn marker. All right. Let's look for special things here that are worth talking about. Okay, what about the ladder assault? Oh, retreat before melee. This is a new thing to this game. All the Muslim units that are with movement allowance 9, which is their cav, as well as the Naphtha Grenadiers and the Muslim Archers of the Eye, can retreat before combat if they're melee attacked. If the Crusader announces an attack against one of those units, the Muslim player can retreat before combat, and he has to do it before the die is rolled. The unit's retreated at least 3 hexes up to its movement point allowance, and it's disrupted. The Naphtha Grenadiers and Archers of the Eyes cannot retreat if any of the attackers are cav. Muslim horse archers outside of the radius of their leader, their command radius of their leader, must retreat before combat if they're going to be meleeed, even if this will result in their elimination. They have to go their full movement allowance plus 3 hexes. Crusader units, which are allocated to melee against units that retreat before combat, may advance normally, and in particular, knights charge. Okay. Let me talk a little bit about advance, because when you force someone to retreat or you destroy someone, you may advance into their hex and along their path of retreat. And I don't believe that was the case in Tyre. And worse than that, knights must, which allows you to do kind of the Saladin tactic of feigning a withdrawal. fact, Taki did that in one of the assaults, and Saladin got confused by it and thought it was actually a rout and pushed his forces out of position. I think that happened prior to this battle, though. Anyway, let us see. The ladder assault. So, in order to make a ladder assault, you roll a die. On a 1 or 2, you fail to mount the walls, and you can't make any melee attack. On a 3 through 6, you succeed, and you must participate in melee against the defending unit, if you can. A leader must be attempting to do a ladder assault or already on the wall or on a siege tower in order to affect the combat. If he doesn't make it up, he can't affect any combats in that area. So you have to make the ladder checks first. German knights and leaders, because of heavier armor, have a 1 through 3 failure. And you can only do this if you're in clear terrain. Yeah, there isn't a lot of that. I guess if you're assaulting this tower. Or a filled-in fosse. I guess you could do it from the back. Okay. What about army morale levels? So there's a number of things that affect army morale. Now these are just a die roll modifier for your army. If you achieve one of these, which could be a good or a bad thing. Army morale start at 0. The first time a Muslim off-map army unit moves into Acre, the morale of the Muslim army and the garrison increase by 1. And this includes wall and tower hexes, including this one, which might be a reason to try to hold that, because it becomes harder for the defender, for the Christian units to defend against that. A little bit, not much. If 30 Muslim army units are eliminated, and you got to keep track of this somehow. Remember, the eliminated box, wherever that may be, is constantly siphoning units off. So I'm not sure there's a clear way to keep track. I guess eliminated units would count as 2 if they've been withdrawn from that and are in sort of the dead pile, the permanent dead pile. Whereas units that are still in it will count as a full one. Anyway, this is only Muslim army units, not the garrison. If 30 of them or more are eliminated, the morale drops by 1 for the Muslims. If King Richard dies, the English army, which is the pale blue units, will be down 1 in morale. If Philippe is killed, the French army, which is the dark blue, goes down by 1. If Leopold is killed, the kind of weird olive green, not really olive, but closer to olive than anything else, will go down by 1. If multiple armies are involved and they each have penalties, so if like the Germans and the French are involved, it looks like the penalties accumulate for a given attack. Okay. Like I said, Crusader Knights, and this includes foot knights, must advance after combat as far as possible along the path of the retreat. Now, these are not knights. These are men-at-arms. We've got foot knights here. Show you the kind of thing, and these are the cav knights. And they have to advance as far along the path of retreat as their movement allowance will take them. Let's see if we've got anything else here. Movement is affected by leader range. So if you're not within leader radius with your unit, and it has to be of your contingent. So like Guy commands one specific contingent. The Kingdom of Jerusalem Group 1 which is this group. Not to be confused with Kingdom of Jerusalem Group 2, which is over here under Joffrey. So you have to be within range of your own leader. If you're not, your movement allowance is halved. But that doesn't affect cavalry. Unless the leader's dead. Okay. Cav can't go into the walls and towers. In any case, they can't attack. They can't do ladder assault. They can't. Well, they can attack the breach, and they can move into a breach. They can also move through the wall if it's friendly controlled, because there are going to be gates in those walls. Cav can't fill fosses. Cav can't walk in the marsh. They may not be placed in the same hex as friendly siege units, although they can move through them. Oh, I may have cheated. I think I've got Cav here. Oh, that's kind of a pain. Try to protect it. Yeah, I had him kind of garrisoning those minor siege units. And let's see. Anything else here? The Cav Crusader charge. So if they do a straight line charge of 4 hexes, and there's some flexibility to that, so you can kind of do a zigzag if you need to, as long as you do it as straight as possible, and announce that you're charging, you are able to double your melee attack strength on an attack, and then you will be disrupted after it. And this has to be announced when it's done. There's no little markers for it. The Muslim Cav cannot do this. Even the Saladin Guard armored Cav. The Naphtha Grenadiers can declare that they're throwing grenades, and that'll force the unit they're attacking to retreat without a die roll. There's an optional rule for Conrad of Mafra, basically saying, hey, what if Guy wasn't here? Because Guy really sucks. And Conrad, who is in charge of the Bretons, I think under here, is actually pretty damn decent. So they exchanged some of the leaders saying, let's play it out with Conrad as the leader. We're not going to do that. We're going to play the historical. The initial setup, well, I don't really have to go into it, but I've chosen to put things near their camps as much as possible, but that's really not a necessity. Okay, so how do you win? The Crusaders win if at the end of any assault phase they've got 10 combat units plus a leader inside Acre. Now this doesn't include the wall. They have to actually make it through the wall. They also win if they kill Saladin. I didn't really explain these yet. I'll get back to them. At the end of an assault phase, if the Muslims have 12 of the Crusader camp hexes, they win. If the end of assault phase, King Richard and King Philip are both dead, the Muslims win. And if neither Crusader or Muslim victories are achieved at the end of the game, 16 turns, according to this, it's a Muslim victory. If 2 people meet their victory conditions on the same time, like let's say Saladin dies but the city is captured, it's considered a draw. Okay, let's go into how these are used, because I forgot about these, but they're pretty exciting. These are the intervention counters. Over the course of the game, the Saladin attacks counter can be picked twice. The Army of Egypt counter can be picked 6 times, and the Army of Mosul counter can be picked 8 times. Okay, 8 plus 6 is 14, plus 2 for Saladin attacks is 16. So you have just enough uses to fill the entire thing. The normal case is you'll pick the Army of Mosul or Egypt counters. If you do so, and the Crusader bombards, those armies don't come on the map. If, on the other hand, you pick the army of Saladin counter, you get all your armies, and they get to make an attack on the Crusader position. It automatically forces us to go into a assault impulse instead of a bombardment phase. So the Crusaders don't get to hit the walls, you're distracting them and doing some damage. And that can buy you some time to repair the walls, which is one reason you might do it. If the Muslims play an assault and and not the Saladin intervention counter is used, they can bring in that force. However, if the Crusader moves a unit into an outer works hex during an assault, or no, that's the only option. Yeah. So if you move into the outer works hex during an assault, that allows the Muslims to throw their entire force into play again. So the Muslims can pull back out of here and play around with some safety, because the Crusader could trigger the whole army coming into play. I thought it also involved breaking into the city, but there's no such role. So you've got to kind of decide what to do with your Saladin attacks. You kind of want to use it, I guess. I didn't realize this. I thought the outer works to the castle, to the city. But no, it's the outer works for the encampment. So you could use it to buy some time with an assault of your own that prevents the bombardment, or you could also hope to time it to hit the Crusader assaults, which might blunt those assaults. Either way, it's interesting. Not absolutely clear which is better, to tell you the truth. I would guess you kind of want to do it when the Crusader's assaulting, because if you do it when he didn't plan an assault, well, I don't know. If you do it when he didn't plan an assault, you strip his turn completely, because he probably doesn't have the force to make the assault there. On the other hand, if you do it when he has an assault planned, you either maybe strip his turn by taking that assault away from him and he has to defend against you, or maybe you buy a chance to actually win the whole game by taking your 12 camps. So, I don't know, as we play it, we'll see how that all kind of plays out. I remember enjoying this one, especially kind of the tension involved with the mining aspect. I'm going to lose a lot of that playing it solo, even though I think I'll be able to simulate an opposed game fairly well. It's just not going to be as exciting as sitting there. I like these kind of hidden aspects to games. I love Midway for it, and I liked it in this. So, well, such as. I didn't fully explain the mining. The first points in the mining have to go to building these tunnel bases. They cost 2 points each, and you'll have 4 mine points. When you do the combat under here, you could lose mine points as the Crusaders, along with hexes. And the Muslims can actually lose their engineering points permanently. They have 6 per turn, but they could lose them in mine fighting. Alright, send this one up, and I hope we'll be able to get a little bit done today.